Hello, everyone. I'm Karthik Narasimhan. I'm an associate professor of computer science at Princeton. I also lead the research team at Sierra, which is a new company that is focused on building conversational AI for the enterprise. So today I want to talk about language agents, which is a topic that has been a major focus of much of my research over the past decade. And what I hope to show you today is how I think this technology is going to be very crucial for automating tomorrow's world. So first, what do I mean by a language agent? If you look up the dictionary definition of an agent, it's essentially anything that can take an active role, which is essentially take actions and affect its environment. Now, most of you may have heard of things that are called language models, right? So models like GPT or Llama, which are probabilistic models that can input language and generate text in some sense. Now, if you take these two concepts, a language agent is essentially something that can both take actions while being able to understand and generate language. Now, you actually don't need to go too far to think of examples of language agents. There are several agents, language agents, actually sitting in this room, right? So yes, any human is by definition a language agent because we're able to take actions and we're able to communicate with each other in language. Now, note that when I say language, I don't only mean human languages like English or Hindi or German, right? Um, even programming languages count, or even math counts as a language because it's essentially a way for us to share knowledge and communicate with each other. So let me give you a more concrete example of what I mean by an autonomous language agent, right? So this is an example. This is some recent work that we did in our lab at Princeton. An example of an agent that can actually help automate software engineering or parts of software engineering. So I'm sure that most of you have, written code in some form, and when you write this code, you normally see that writing the code itself is only 20% of the work, and most of the time and effort actually goes in maintaining the code, right? So fixing bugs, issues, and refactoring the code and so on. So what we did over here is we essentially built an agent on top of these large language models like GPT and so on that can automatically take in some issue description, right? So you say that, this code has some problem, right, in pure English, and it can take this issue description and automatically take actions, generate code patches, try it out, execute the code, and do all sorts of these different things in a loop. And it can take these hundreds of actions before finally resolving the issue by running these tests and confirming that the issue has been solved. So this is an example of a language agent that can, really help automate something that is as mundane as bug fixing, right? So this is something that, if you think about our economy, a lot of human time and effort actually goes into fixing bugs in enterprise code, and so this is an example of a language agent that can successfully take much of that workload and automate things. Now, why am I telling you all this, right? So, as you probably are wondering, this is a session that is focused on multi-agent interaction, right? So, when you think about this, our entire world, in some sense, is a giant multi-agent playground, right? So, as humans, we've built societies, we built, nations, and the way that we work with each other, collaborate with each other is by interacting with each other, right? So the entire world is a multi-agent playground, and the whole basis of trading, negotiating, and trading goods and services and so on rely on the fact that we can interact with each other in rich and nuanced ways. And so the reason I'm talking about language agents in this whole setup is because I believe language plays a crucial role in any multi-agent interaction, right? And this is obvious when you think about it, right? Why do we need language? It is key for any sort of multi-agent communication and collaboration, right? So and the more abstract and nuanced the language is, right? So English versus, just making sounds, we're able to talk at a much more richer and abstract level. And this is key towards, how we've built out the entire society and are able to, specialize different roles and so on, and actually make progress in a much, much faster way. So driving down a little bit deeper, right? If you think about why language is key for this multi-agent communication and collaboration, you can think of at least two reasons, right? So on the one hand, language is how we communicate with each other in real time, right? And so if we want AI agents to do the same, right? So we need these agents to be able to communicate real time with other agents, be they human agents or other AI agents themselves, right? So in some sense, we want these agents to have this capability to chat or communicate with language in some sense, because that is how, as humans, we specify what we want, and we are also able to take in information and understand the world around us. So if we want agents to live in the world, we need them to communicate the same way. And on top of that, another reason we want these language agents to understand and really be good at language understanding is because it can help them understand the world better by reading and listening. So as a human society, we have actually written down much of our knowledge, much of our discoveries in the form of books, manuals, web pages on the internet and whatnot, right? And if you really think about it, the main reason that society keeps progressing and builds upon each generation's work is because we use this knowledge and build upon it. We don't reinvent the wheel or reinvent things from scratch. And so if you want AI agents to be doing the same, right, in this giant multi-agent framework, we want them to be able to do the same, right? We want them to be able to read and understand things, not just do trial and error all the time. And we want them to be able to listen and so on, and figure out, how things work in the world. So that's sort of like how I view the path forward towards building more and more capable language agents. At this current stage, we have these agents that can operate on their own, but I'm pretty sure that in the near term future, we're going to have agents talking to each other, not just to humans and so on. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out, right? So we're going to have a network of both humans and agents living together. Now, that being said, there are a few immediate challenges for making this a reality, right? That this vision that I just talked about. And I'll sort of bucket them into at least these three main categories. So the first one is essentially building good evaluations, right? So how do we actually determine these AI agents are ready for the real world in some sense, right? So throughout the history of AI so far, right, we mostly focus on static benchmarks and data sets. That's not going to cut it when we think about these agents that are actually interacting in the real world in a dynamic setting. Once we build those evaluations, we'll have a better sense of what we need to do to make them successful. And then we should be able to develop and use more principal frameworks for agent development, right? So not just doing prompting and things like that, but actually think about cognitive architectures and the like to be able to provide robust guarantees on the agents. And then finally, as these agents actually get deployed in the real world, we need to make sure they're trustworthy and safe, right? And this is extra critical because, all the AI systems, machine learning systems that we had so far are nothing compared to these agents that are much more powerful, dynamic, can take actions, can actually affect the world in ways that, we may not be able to even envision, right? So this is critical to ensure. So I'll give you one example of the first challenge that I just talked about, right? So this is some recent work that we did at Sierra. It's called Tau Bench. Tau, Tau is the Greek symbol, but it's also short for tool agent user. And so what we did here is essentially create a benchmark where a language agent has to take on the role of a customer service representative and is both interacting with a human, right, who's dynamically providing requests, as well as an environment, which is a set of API tools and the like. So this is a challenging task because the agent has to, deal with partial information provided by the user, interact with the tools, figure out what it needs, and so on, right? And it's also very, very realistic because this is a very, very real world use case that we're seeing in the enterprise case, right? So it's exactly what we'd want when we think about interacting with an autonomous agent, right? So if you just want to change your flight reservation anytime 24/7, you want to be able to do that and to be able to do that in a form that's natural to you, right? Which is just plain English or whatever language you prefer. So we built this benchmark, and one of the key things that we found, right, is that the current agents are not reliable, right? So this is going to be something that's going to be critical for us to solve. So in this graph over here, ignore the dotted lines, just look at the solid lines over here. And what you're seeing essentially is performance that steeply degrades when we just run the same scenario 2 times or 4 times or even 8 times, right? So, and the degradation is quite steep, right? So you can see even the best models here degrade from like 60% of performance, which is low on its own, to something like 25 or something. So the key takeaway here is, I do believe that we're building agents that are moving towards this multi-agent future, but we need to solve critical issues like reliability and dependability before we can deploy them in the real world. So overall, I'll sort of leave you with a more optimistic sort of summary, right? So I think it's a really exciting time now because the developments in large language models and decision making and so on have led us to get a glimpse of what these language capable agents can be and how they can dynamically interact with humans in the loop and so on. Something that has been a dream of artificial intelligence for decades now. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, right? So I think we have some concrete challenges to solve to make them more reliable, have the capability to control them, and ensure they're trustworthy and so on. But at the same time, I think if we solve the crux of the issue, which is essentially, having them understand different kinds of language, be able to communicate with humans in real time, and be able to use language as a tool for reasoning or more complex computation, things like that. I think the future is really bright, and we can have a truly collaborative multi-agent environment in the world, where I can imagine that both AI agents and humans work in tandem and raise the bar in terms of, both in terms of economic productivity and so on, but also being able to accelerate new discoveries in science, in outer space, and so on, and then really propel humankind forward. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what I think is going to happen in the near future, and I hope we see these advances very soon. I'll stop here. Thank you.